Warriors need to be made. Most people have a deep-seated resistance to killing another human being. The journey from civilian to warrior is one of transformation. It all begins here, in boot camp.
Basically, when I got to boot camp, one of the first things that the Marine Corps tried to do was eliminate anything that was related to our civilian life, because they wanted to make us Marines.
Open it! Open it! Go away! Go away! Empty! Empty! Yes, sir! Oh, no, sir. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I know what you need. You don't tell me. Everything out of your pockets. Let's go. Let's go. You gotta be kidding me. Let's go.
What they needed to do was really bust us down to where we weren't anything. We were the lowest thing on the face of the earth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then the process was to gradually build us up.
Basic training, in a sense, is a transformation period, and it's geared to instill some very major, drastic changes in identity and in behavior. You're not allowed to wear your personal clothes. Someone else is controlling your hairstyle or the lack of it.
The transformation starts right away. The new recruits are kept off balance and exhausted.
You're dictated what to wear and when to eat, where to eat, what to eat, how to sleep, where to sleep. Obviously, situations like that, when they're compounded with increased fatigue, tend to lead to a more regressive psychological state where it's rather easy to influence people thinking.
Motivation, teamwork, that stuff is doggone contagious, you understand? Yes, sir! Now, I told you from day one, I'm not tolerating any individuals, you understand? Yes, sir! Individual, isolation, they both start with I, don't they? Yes, sir! Teamwork is not something you can just up and start doing, you understand? Yes, sir! Had to start from day one, you understand? Yes, sir! Now, who else have experienced teamwork since they've been here? Yes, sir!
The process of transforming a 17 or 18-year-old civilian into a 17 or 18-year-old Marine is really the process of becoming unselfish, because that young man or that young woman begins to learn right from the get-go that he or she is a member of a team.
What happens here is that the recruits are going to be negotiating all these obstacles. There's 15 obstacles. This is known as the confidence course. This builds their confidence along with their endurance, their stamina, and agility. And again, the whole key word is confidence. Operationally, it gives them enormous initiative, actually, which is very important to any Marine, because you can't just sit and wait for the battle to come to you. You have to go seek the battle out.
These would-be warriors are also trained in skills that will help them kill efficiently. The first step is learning how to shoot.
Let the trigger finger do all the work. Don't anticipate, and don't breathe.
At first, this recruit felt nervous, but after the instructors instructed him, this recruit felt confident, and this recruit was shooting bullseyes, man. Self-esteem went a little too high, man. This recruit feels bigger than he really is, man.
The night before we graduated, they took us to the movies. And on our way back to the billets where we slept from the movies, the drill instructor asked us if we'd start digging our heels in as we marched back, and he said he wanted the entire barracks to hear us. So I'll never forget the sound that we made. And we came back to where our billets was and stopped. He had us do a right face, and then he told each and every one of us that we were now United States Marines. And I had a lump in my throat, and I'll just never forget the feeling I had realizing that I'd made it through boot camp and I was finally a Marine.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the national flag passes directly in front of you, please rise.
Graduation is only the beginning. These newly minted Marines still have a long way to go before they can be relied upon in battle.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the national flag...
It's a paradox. Throughout history, mankind has been at war. Evidence from both ancient and modern battles has shown that individuals often find it very difficult to kill. This was true even during a war as cruel as Vietnam. Butch Pettit fought in the tunnels around Cu Chi.
We had guys that froze up in a lot of firefights. They just couldn't do it. They wouldn't fire a shot. And there were a lot of guys and a lot of units that were that way. They never fired a shot.
During World War II, the US Army began worrying that American soldiers wouldn't kill the enemy. Army researchers discovered that only 15 to 20% of soldiers actually fired their weapons in combat.
A surprisingly small number of people would fire their weapons. Many feigned firing, many shot in directions which obviously were not the directions of the enemy, but they attempted not to hit anyone.
After the war, the military launched a technical revolution in combat training that still continues today. It's now all about realism. Even the old-fashioned round bullseye target was discarded in favor of plastic dummies.
One way was to change the targets at which they fired from things that looked like bullseyes or whatever into things that resembled people.
This is the US Marine base at Camp Pendleton, California. Here, young Marine riflemen are about to practice an uphill assault. Their weapons are loaded with live ammunition.
It's the closest that you can get to combat without actually being in combat. The only difference is rounds are going that way, there's none coming this way.
Right to left!
Oh yeah, you get a huge adrenaline rush. I mean, there's nothing in my life I've done to this point except maybe playing baseball and playing for the state championship that gives you quite that adrenaline rush, something like that.
By constantly repeating these assaults, new survival instincts are burnt into the Marines.
An essential ingredient in training is repetition. It's called muscle memory. Essentially, it says that you don't need to think. You just go ahead and do. The kinds of response that are essential, repeated over and over and over again, become, if not instinctive, at least part of that quote muscle memory, unquote bank that one has and can rely on.
Clear! Last Marine! Last Marine!
I just have a belief it's just like anything else, any type of fighting. If it takes 2,000 punches to make it instinctive, then it must at least take 2,000 rushes to make it instinctive. And throughout their whole career, they do it over and over and over again until it's perfected, until it becomes more fluid.
But training isn't war. No army has ever learned how to get soldiers used to the terror of mortal combat.
Training can get you prepared somewhat, but it doesn't prepare you for the mental aspect of actual combat itself until you actually get out there on the battlefield and you experience firsthand what it's like when you engage the enemy.
Well, lots of elements are missing, but the main thing is just the combat stress. You know, you can train to a standard, but you can't train for some of the things that you're gonna actually see in combat. Sometimes just the sight of a dead body or your friend screaming and yelling because they're injured or whatever, that's something you can't train anyone for.
But every year, billions are spent worldwide training young men and women to kill. The British Army is practicing war fighting skills on the chalky downs of Salisbury Plain, England. In this war game, a full armoured battle group is attacking. Facing them are the 4-5 Royal Marine Commandos. These are experienced soldiers who have seen active service in the former Yugoslavia or Northern Ireland. Their weapons are modified to fire invisible lasers. The round discs on their helmets and webbing are sensors that register hits from the lasers. The tanks, planes and helicopters also carry them. At headquarters, the high-tech exercise is overseen by Philip Napier, a combat veteran of the Gulf War.
At 1800.
However much training you've done, and however much time you've done that, and however confident you are, you're never quite sure how you're going to perform.
For the soldiers in the field, the game is made as real as possible. Anything could happen. Suddenly, they're hit by a surprise helicopter assault. But they react quickly, and the attacking force in light-coloured desert camouflage find themselves surrounded by Marines.
Who's been hit? Yes! Move to that furthest wood then first! Give us covering fire!
Sergeant Paul Hill's platoon has barely covered a few hundred metres. The pinging noise is the sensors registering kills made by the Royal Marine Commandos.
Dead guys, pass your ammo on. Tony, game pinged, do you? Yeah. Toddy, Simo! About 5 years left! No, he's out!
It's as good as realism with this equipment. As you can see, the bleeping represents I'm now dead and I have to lay here and I'm not allowed to move anywhere.
Roger, the aircraft's overhead now.
We need to move back. If you're going to blow that bit, no, but if you're going to blow the bridge, you're going to put the mortars down.
On a percentage scale, this is about 95%. You just, adrenaline just carries you and carries you and carries you until you're finished. But this is very good. This is the most realistic way of training.
The games continue well into the night. 2 a.m. Marine Gavin Payne is on watch at a machine gun post. He's never been in combat and he's aching to go.
The only problem is with this job is you train for it all the time, but you never get a chance to do it. Like everybody else, you get like a fighter pilot, he actually trains and he does his job, or, you know, anybody really. A teacher trains, does the job. We train, but since I've joined, we've never actually really done the job, so it's a bit of a melancholy situation, really.
You're dealing here with young people who are adventuresome, who are seeking thrills, and combat is a form of adventure and thrill. It is, for the person in uniform, the ultimate test of how good he or she is.
Payne is suddenly surprised by the sound of armoured vehicles approaching. He doesn't know if they're friend or foe.
Andy, can you hear me, over? Sounds like a truck vehicle off to the left. Yeah. I can't see it yet. Two warriors.
With his night vision equipment, Payne can see 2 warrior armoured vehicles. If it's a surprise attack, his light weapons won't be able to stop them.
If this was for real, we were up against armour. Pretty nervous, to be honest.
Though he's been on active service in Kosovo, Marine Payne has never had to fire his weapon at another human being.
It's one of those sort of scenarios you'd get there, and it'd be like, it's either them or us, and we're here to do a job, just get it done. But I mean, I can't say anything because I've never killed anybody. So it's easy for me to sit here on Salisbury Plain and say that. It's another thing to have somebody else in your sights and have to do it. But hopefully you would make the right decision at the time.
2 months after this exercise, the British government promised to make Royal Marine Commandos available for combat in Afghanistan.
The first time I was involved in combat, I was scared, very scared.
The first moments when I was in combat were very lonely. And we're always normally chatty and confident and telling each other jokes. And then when we were suddenly faced with the realities of war, it all stopped.
You feel isolated, you feel kind of alone at times. You can be by yourself, and again, it's almost like being in the dark all by yourself.
One thing that comes into your mind immediately is, I want to look through this. Somebody's shooting at you and is trying to kill you.
All the hours of preparation come down to one unpredictable moment. How does the warrior perform in combat?
When you're fighting in combat and the adrenaline is flowing, you could have sort of one side of the coin whereby somebody gets up, weapon in his hand, grenade between his teeth, up and running at the machine gun post that he's about to storm. The other side of the coin is that emotion totally flips a guy's lid and he just can't cope with the situation.
Anybody who has been in a car crash will have a vague idea of the terror warriors feel in combat. They say things seem to move in slow motion. Their entire being is focused on survival. Most people will instinctively want to roll up into a ball or run away. In extreme cases, fear can even cause temporary paralysis.
Just sheer panic. And I do remember at those times I felt the thirstiest I've ever been. I felt very weak. It was like you didn't want to shoot, you wanted to just get behind something and not have to worry about it, but you couldn't do that. It was panic.
This is the body's automatic reaction to a physical threat. A set of chemicals called stress hormones are released into the blood. Within milliseconds, they cause the heart rate to rise. blood rushes into all the major muscles. The pupils dilate and the throat goes dry. Many will empty their bowels and urinate involuntarily.
Your adrenaline jumps to 1,000 from, let's say, 250, and so does the rest of your body and your mind.
This is where modern military training should prove its worth. It gives the warrior the instincts necessary to survive in combat, even when fear renders him helpless. Instead of rolling into a ball, training has taught him to do the irrational. Run towards the enemy and try to kill him.
Most people can be taught to overcome the natural resistance to killing another human being and do so. The fear of dying, the fear of being assaulted, the fear of having those you care about get killed or assaulted can be a terribly powerful motivating force to return fire.
Every warrior who kills in combat experiences that moment differently. The only common thread is that time does not erase the memory. The moment lasts forever.
The first time I killed somebody, I was on a fire base that was being overrun, and I assumed that I killed them, that they were just silhouettes that they were at the top of the hill.
Are you really going to shoot a person who's going to fall down? Yes, no, maybe. I think I was myself busy with that question then. And yes, you pull the trigger and you shoot, and all of a sudden you see you hit someone, and he doesn't fall immediately, he falls a little bit later, you shoot some more, and he's dead.
I felt absolutely nothing. In fact, it don't bother me now. It happened.
By the time we got over the bodies, what I did was go over there, and just as I got close, maybe from me to you away, the one guy pushed himself up on both hands like this, and his eyes got about that big, and he looked at me. I could feel my hands start to shake a little like this. And I looked down, and I said, I gotta get a grip, I gotta get a grip.
Paratrooper Ed Kelly came face to face with his enemy in the jungles of Vietnam.
I really didn't have to do anything except simply squat down and let him get as close to me as I wanted him to, which was about 6 or 7 meters, and then I shot him dead. And I felt real good about that. I did. Because he had not gotten the drop on me, I'd gotten the drop on him. See?
It's a magic moment. It's something, you know, time stops for you as the first time. But I believe I remember, even today, I can maybe remember the eye contact, his eyes. Just, you know, this split second before he fell down.
After that, it was nothing, you know? After you kill your first man, there's nothing to it, nothing. It's like that line. Once you walk over that line, there's no return. And it's just too easy, because you've been there.
We might think warriors need to hate their enemy in order to kill them in battle. But a more powerful emotion is also at play: brotherly love. The Israeli army is one of the world's most effective fighting forces. It's organized around a notion called the Brotherhood of Soldiers.
The brotherhood, the togetherness, that's the important thing. Because when you are under fire, you don't think about the country, and you don't think about your mother. The only thing you think about is the guy who stands next to you.
The Israeli army is a people's army. Every boy and girl in the country is drafted in at the age of 18. When they're called up, everybody's treated exactly the same. There are no separate officers' schools. From the very beginning, the Israelis forced their draftees to bond, to become like family. The idea is that soldiers will fight with skill and aggression to defend their brother soldiers and therefore the state.
Very quick, very fast, you know them more than you know anyone in your family, real family. And it becomes a family. You have to depend on them, they have to depend on you.
Israeli units are incredibly close. These soldiers will serve together for the next 3 years, and then every year in the reserves until they're well into their 40s.
It's till the death, this friendship. Every one of those friends will sacrifice himself, and you will do the same. That was something special.
When Israel Tauber fractured his leg during training, he discovered how deep this friendship went. It was a silent exercise. His team had to carry a stretcher weighing over 113 kilos. They wouldn't let him help.
We keep moving and walking, and I'm trying again. I can't talk with them. I just, you know, try to sign them. You must rest for a while. So I try to get into under the stretcher, and they push me out again. And I will never forget it. I mean, they suffered for me.
It's not just Israel. All armies rely on the power of brotherly love to motivate their soldiers.
I'm going to protect the people around me. I don't think whether I have to take anyone's life. If I have to do it, I'll just do it. And I'll just, maybe I'll think about it, wonder about it, dream about it later.
Under fire, warriors form very strong bonds. They really do become brothers in arms. Ed Kelly experienced this in Vietnam.
When you're in a combat situation, you got bullets flying over your head, you got mortar rounds landing in the midst of you, I'm not thinking about the American flag. I'm thinking about the kid over here that's going to help me get out of this alive.
But there's a downside to this alliance. When a fellow soldier is killed or badly wounded, the survivors are inconsolable with grief.
Still running through my mind daily is the screams of these young kids who've suffered horrible wounds.
United States Marine Mike Castle experienced this pain on his very first day in Vietnam. He had been assigned to carry a rocket launcher. With him were his two best friends, both riflemen. They were flown by a helicopter straight into battle.
I heard the shots and the fires going on. I'm totally frightened. And we were in rice paddies. And so they're howling for rockets up. Well, I seen my first friend, Bazoo, laying there, and his helmet was laying there, and his face was totally white, and he had a bullet hole in the middle of his head. This was very hard for me because he was a very close friend. I went into a great deal of shock, and I went another 100 yards and I found my best friend Marty. And Marty had a bullet hole in the middle of his head. I can remember that I grabbed Marty and I looked at him and I told him that he did not look good. What did they do to him? Why did they do this to him? And this fierce battle is going on. And all I'm in a silence. It was probably the worst day of my life. I was 18 years old.
For many, grief turns to anger and hatred. Killing the enemy becomes a personal vendetta.
I hated them. I wanted to hate them. I wanted to hurt them. And I wanted to be part of it. And I was, in every way I could be.
Since the invention of the cannon, far more deaths in combat have resulted from long-distance weaponry than from close range. Today, warriors rarely come close to those they kill. Though soldiers rarely see the terror on the faces of their enemy, the killing still has a psychological effect.
When you're at long range, it's much more clinical and much more... There's a lot more thought process in it because it's not so much an instinct. And actually, perhaps in some ways, that's more difficult. You have to have your mind attuned to why you're doing it before you pull the trigger.
Major Philip Napier commanded a group of Challenger tanks in the Gulf War. Early on in the battle, he called for a multiple rocket launcher attack on an Iraqi armored group.
At 1 o'clock, precisely in the morning, I started seeing these rockets coming through the sky. And we all opened up our turrets and stood up on top of the tank. We then watched the most incredibly scary fireworks display for about half an hour. And at first light, we went in, and there was really nothing left. There were dead bodies and injured everywhere. To see the crews who tried to escape climbing out, but burning and eventually going rather like a burning candle, and people running around screaming, holding their ears with blood pouring out. And it was a very scary moment.
Pull pin. Pull, twist, pull. Prepare to throw. Load a grenade. Who said throw it out?
No matter how advanced the weaponry, warriors can still find themselves fighting hand-to-hand and face-to-face.
Put the bag in his face, smother! Behind your leg.
You come in direct contact with someone where you can look them in the face, look them direct eye-to-eye contact, as in hand-to-hand combat, it brings a different perspective on it. It has a tendency to play on somewhat emotions, somewhat of what is right and wrong.
Hand-to-hand combat can quickly break down into the most primitive sort of fighting. Dan Wagoner discovered this in the middle of an assault on a North Vietnamese, or NVA, position.
When I fired all my ammunition and I didn't have any more clips left, I jumped into a foxhole that was empty, and I jumped right on top of an NVA soldier that had the same thoughts that was hiding in there. And he was probably every bit as scared as what I was. When I jumped on top of him, my immediate reaction was to reach out, grab him, and try to choke him, and I couldn't kill him just by choking him. And I reached over, and there was a helmet, and I grabbed it, and I started bashing him in the head until I killed him. That's something that really haunts me because it was dark, but I could still see his face and the expression he had.
Warriors pay a heavy price. The fear of dying, grief for their fallen friends, and the psychological toll of killing leave many numb, detached, and full of hatred.
You see, it's hard to explain something like that, and that's what builds up. I mean, you build up this hatred that you don't care, you care about anything. As long as you get them, you don't care if you live or die.
We used to say that we were animals and that we behaved like animals, and we almost, and I dare to say this, and I'm not proud to say this, but we almost felt like we enjoyed the fact that we were killing our enemy.
It's true in every war. Research suggests that it takes only 60 days of uninterrupted combat to drive most men to total psychological collapse. Lebanon, 1982. The Israeli army had invaded. Israel Tauber fought here. His was a brutal war.
I went to pee, and suddenly I saw part of a body. And I think that was a kind of moment that something broke down inside. I remember myself just can't stand this situation. I started to run, like running away from there.
Most recent wars have been short-lived confrontations. But experience with extended conflict is very different. Some warriors even grow to take pleasure in killing. It becomes almost a ritual. On his second tour of Vietnam, Ed Kelly became a Cobra helicopter pilot.
Orgasmic. It felt almost orgasmic to be firing from a Cobra into a position that we knew was hostile. Every time I punched a pair of rockets off, felt real good. Felt real good.
Aggression breeds aggression because it relieves you of a lot of tension, and in some perverse way, it also is gratifying. And some individuals may become addicted.
In the last 50 years, we've become very skilled in preparing soldiers for the business of war. Realistic training, building tight bonds between soldiers, harnessing fear, all of these help the warrior to kill more efficiently. But the psychological challenge is still great. One tactic is to think of the enemy simply as an obstacle to be eliminated.
I don't think of it as anything personal. I don't think of it as a living thing. It is a target.
You see him for a split of a second or something like that. You shoot him and he's gone. He's lying on the ground, he's dead. You don't know him. You don't know his name. You don't know where he came from. You don't know anything about him. There's nothing personal there.
Often, the enemy is stripped of his humanity. A criminal, a terrorist, an animal. It's easier to kill something less than human.
They were vermin. They lived in little holes and they would only come out and fight whenever they chose. I didn't see anything human about them. They were, and I still feel the same way. Don't get me wrong. They were rodents. Rodents.
But it's difficult for soldiers to maintain the falsehood that they're not killing people. Sometimes it's a slow realization. Other times, the fact that the enemy is human is brought home much quicker. When Boaz Ben-Uri was fighting in Lebanon, his enemy was the Syrian army. In the chaos of that war, opposing armies wore the same uniforms. It was sometimes impossible to know who was the enemy.
It's just crazy, you know. You see it all of a sudden without planning it, with the enemy. Smoking and joking and smiling and laughing. All of a sudden you have a chance to see them as human beings, not just as targets.
During a lull in the fighting, 2 Syrian soldiers joined him, not realizing he was an Israeli.
All of a sudden they understood we were Israelis. And yes, we are enemies. And all of a sudden, everything changed. So they took their weapons in a very hostile way. So we had to shoot them. This gave me a completely different look on this war and combats and whatever. Because they sat with us. You could smell them and hear them and whatever. And then 2 minutes afterwards, you have to shoot them. They went from human beings laughing, smiling, smoking, to dead people lying on the ground a few meters from you. That's it.
For the warriors who make it back from foreign wars, medals, marches, and adulation await. But even heroes have remorse. Colin Smith fought with the British paratroopers, who, although outnumbered, defeated the Argentinians in bloody hand-to-hand combat in the Falklands War. His celebrations didn't last forever.
It took me a good sort of couple of months to get over the jubilation and the fact that I was sort of being treated as a hero wherever I went. You know, remorse didn't come into it for a good while afterwards. But sooner or later, those targets, although they were now sort of gone in history, they were once living things, and they are sort of, or were, somebody's loved ones.
But when the battles are over, the warriors go home. How do those who have been trained to kill, and who have killed, make the transition back to civilian life? Do they ever forget?
It's the guilt that I brought home from the naam that tears us apart, eats at us. You know, it's a poison. It's a slow death. We often say that the guys that got killed over there, they're the lucky ones because they don't suffer. They're not suffering for 33, 34 years after the fact, mentally. You know, that war's like 15 minutes ago for me.
Combat is one of the most horrific situations a human being can be exposed to. And these often give rise to more prolonged and deep and enduring psychological wounds that are oftentimes invisible in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders that ensue and oftentimes are incurable.
When I went to Vietnam, I was like any other high school kid out of school. I had a lot of dreams and I had a lot of ambition. And I think I was basically a fairly good person. And when I was in Vietnam, I saw things and did things and lived through things that normal 18, 19-year-old boys don't go through.
there will always be young men and women ready to shoulder the burden of combat. We expect them to risk their lives and sometimes to commit terrible acts. They will be the ones to pay the price.
The elation and excitement of knowing you were going to go and prove to the world that you were the best army and you were the best soldiers and you were the best tank crew, I think wasn't what we felt at the end. Really our views had changed completely, and we wouldn't want to do that again.
No, when I was a kid, I dreamed about being a cowboy. Dreamed about going to war.
I don't look forward to combat unless it's something that I'm called upon to do, unless it's something that needs to be done. I'm not someone that, like I said before, enjoys wanting to go out there unless there's a purpose behind it. And if there's a purpose behind it, then I'm all for it.